Tell us about Okoa Mombasa and what the whole movement is all about, especially when it comes to SGR. Wanjiru.
Right. In fact, I'll start by saying every regime of our country has a definitive infrastructure project, that marks it. Moi had Goldenberg, its big corruption scandal. Kibaki had Anglo-leasing, and Uhuru Kenyatta has the SGR. Controversial, large, procured under very dubious circumstances. And in the case of the SGR, there is an organized group that is lobbying around the SGR, Okoa Mombasa, and they have been lobbying on several grounds, key of which is the socio-economic impacts of the SGR and its attendant projects on the local community, and we'll hear more from them. But on Monday, Okoa Mombasa, in conjunction with the Institute for Social Accountability, ourselves, we are very honored to be part of this petition. We filed a petition at the High Court seeking to obtain all contracts, agreements, and studies related to the construction and operation of the SGR. The 450 billion SGR is the most expensive infrastructure project in Kenya's history and was financed mainly via loans through the Export-Import Bank of China. President Uhuru Kenyatta promised to release the contracts in 2018, but has yet to follow through.
So, what you're seeking and what the campaigners have been seeking is information relating to this infrastructural development, the contracts, the agreements. So, what did you promise? How are we going to be paying back? What's the collateral? What happens if we default? All those. That's the information that you're seeking. Plus, now the socio-economical impact that have been done. Are you telling me that none of this information has ever been released, even starting from the ESIA before the project commenced?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think Khalifa will be in a better position to speak to that. But that's exactly the point. Because this is a bilateral agreement, the government has proceeded on the basis that these agreements are confidential. They are party to the negotiations between countries and therefore have not been released in the public domain. So approvals were made by cabinet. Questions were raised in Parliament, but despite any questions Parliament may have raised, despite any issues that the court may have raised, yes, the contracts aren't available. But it's not just the SGR. Even as we go on, we've floated a new bond, issued a new bond, the Euro bond. Similarly, those contracts aren't available. So there's a lot of information now being made available, more than before, to give Treasury a little bit of credit. And I say a little bit because it's producing reports on the loans and obligations facing this country. But there's crucial information that's not there. Information around collateral, information around what are the terms. What happens if? Are you able to renegotiate? Who are the underwriters? What is promised? And some of the experts say, keep asking the question, if these terms are not controversial, or if there isn't something wrong, why don't they just release them? So in the case of the Eurobonds, it's what they call the indentures, and the underwriters, let these be known, let these terms be released. And in the case of the SGR, let us know what's in this contract.
What's the constitutional threshold? What is it that is actually required by government in such issues when it comes to disclosure?
Oh, very good. The Constitution is very clear and it's very broad. It's a statement that all public information must be made available unless it's established that that information is going to be prejudicial to national security. Right? And that case has not been made. Then the other law that comes into effect is the public procurement law, which requires all these documents to be made available. Further to that, apart from the access, and then there's the access to information law, which also requires now this environmental impact assessment, all the supporting documentation. So not only do we have a constitutional standard, we have an access to information law, and we have a public procurement law that requires these documents to be made available. And the reason for this is, how can you oversight what you don't know? The devil is in the details. So what is now known is the total figure, the dates of the repayments and when they are due. But there are other details in there that we need to know. And the concern is what, there's a very good documentary produced by Africa Uncensored. They partnered with Okoa Mombasa and last year produced excellent video. And they talked about overlord terms. China is operating in Africa using overlord terms. So they come in as an overlord, where you get into a contract. The arbitration can only be done in China.
Under Chinese law.
Under Chinese law. The terms are beneficial to the Chinese. So it's a very extractive contract. And then those contracts are confidential. China doesn't do this everywhere in the world, but it's doing this in Africa. So you actually go back to what does slavery look like in modern day times? Yes.
What is it? Looks like.
Yeah, because slavery is about power.
Yep.
It's about a misalignment of power and an abuse of power. It's when our sovereignty means nil surrounding a particular contract.
But do they insist that we must have this business with them on those contracts? Or is it that our leaders accept these terms?
Is it our weak negotiation?
Even during slavery, there were the enablers. They had to be the conduits. And the people were sitting pawns. So it's a new form of colonization.
Yes.
Because it impedes our, today we are talking about taxing, okay, we're not going to tax ugali, we're going to increase taxation to airtime and Kenya's general living. And probably it will come back to bread. But the reason for these domestic taxes, and we've said here, we are not able to push back against government because government's already signed the contract.
But do we have alternatives? Let me just say why I'm asking. Because here we are pointing a finger at China. They're doing what is in their best interest. And I'm thinking, the West that we speak of, since when did they do things that were in our interest?
Such contracts are not unique to these ones by China, right?
Exactly.
They have happened even with other countries.
Yes.
Other countries who've come in as development partners as well.
Yes.
So
they're happening as we speak. The difference maybe with the multilaterals is there's a Paris Agreement. After the 1990s, structural adjustment programs where there was an obvious imbalance of power, obvious violation of lending facilities, Paris agreements were drawn up to put international lenders in check. China has been outside of that framework. Commercial lenders are outside of that framework, and they are therefore abusing international lending practices.
But the alternative that they provide is against a backdrop of what was available before and terms which people may have considered unacceptable. So they have options which, as you're saying, appear to be draconian and isn't in their interest, but it's against that backdrop because when the options were available, why would I move to something that isn't beneficial to me? Why?
Exactly.
And the reason is because if we look at the other lenders, whether it's IMF, the tag that IMF, World Bank have also had is that they lean towards some of the Western countries and that their thinking supports the thinking and the power structure of the Western countries. So, you see, it's a debate that's ongoing and there is evidence to lend to that particular way of thinking.
I would draw a line or a separation between multilateral lending that is governed by the Paris kind of accord and has standards which you can litigate on, and you'll find those projects, those contracts are available locally. The ones that are giving us problems are the commercial. It's the Eurobonds, it's the syndicated loans, and it's the bilaterals. So those ones are actually our major debt problem is there. And that is where government goes in. For instance, with the first Eurobond, they went in for a certain amount of money, were able to get 4 times that. So they took the larger amount. You had the attorney saying this time, we were very disciplined. We were oversubscribed, but we only took the amount that we had planned because we are watching. It is only because we are watching.
Or is it we're being watched?
We are watching.
Of what benefit would government have?
Right?
Jointly. Let's bring in our
we need
guest.
the contract.
Let's bring in our guest. Khelef Khalifa is the director of the Muslim for Human Rights, Muhuri, and is also part of the Okoa Mombasa coalition. And he joins us now on the line. Good morning, Khelef.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you.
You've had the introduction, and Wanjiru has given us a brief of this particular petition that you've taken to court and what exactly you're seeking. I just want to ask from that very beginning, like Wanjiru has said, in 2018, President Uhuru Kenyatta says, it's details about this. Details will be available. We have nothing to hide. Since then, what efforts have you made as Muhuri, as Okoa Mombasa, to get access to this information about the contracts, about the agreements that have been made, and about all the details surrounding SGR?
Thank you very much. And I think Wanjiru has explained it very, very explicitly. Our problem emanates from its inception. The agreement and the reason why they are building this railway and the SGR and Exim Bank, everything was shrouded in mystery. Unfortunately, we did try to engage the government. In fact, we wrote to PS, Minister of Transport, Minister Director of KPA. We wrote to Director General of Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. We wrote to Registrar General, State Law Office. We wrote to Solicitor General. We also wrote to PS National Treasury, trying to seek what is this behind this agreement. At the end, we also write to Attorney General, and nothing was forthcoming. So everything was shrouded in mystery. But what alerted us more when Honorable Raila Odinga publicly, he said when they started negotiating with the Chinese between him and Kibaki, he said this regime has inflated the price for about 100 billion shillings. So we thought there's something amiss. And we are not politicians. We are not seeking uchochezi. We just seek the truth. This notion that we elect president, we elect parliamentarians, governors, MCAs, so they have right to speak about us without us asking, that has gone. Since the promulgation of the new constitution, it has placed us in front of everybody, that the government cannot do anything unless they have public participation, in which they bypass. So this notion that they can do everything on our behalf, that has gone. But unfortunately, the government is not coming.
Right.
You all remember what happened. You all remember what happened in Eurobond. It's a lot of money. When the public demanded to tell us where did the money go, it was not forthcoming. We were saying, no, they put it in treasury. So you don't borrow the money for the sake of borrowing. You borrow the money for a specific purpose. That specific purpose was never
made public.
Coming forth.
If I can ask you, if just looking at it, as you look at all of these details, of what benefit would it be to government to keep this information under wraps?
Because they have something to hide. That's it. There is nothing. If they don't have anything to hide, they should have made public. Now, let me tell you this. Part of the agreement, if there's going to be a dispute between Kenya government and the Chinese, the arbitration will be done in China, not in Kenya, not in any other country. The arbitration will be done in China. So it is a disadvantage to us. You see, this SGR, as they call it Madaraka Day, because Madaraka Express, because It was meant for political purpose. You see, people want to show that we have done maendeleo makubwa kabisa before the election, few months before the election. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And it will be done. And everything went hayway. You see, there is a lot of... we went to court. We want to establish the truth. Because the government cannot come to us and tell us it's secret. They use public money. Okay, when it involves, let's say, military, what kind of weapons we bought and so they can say, okay, this has got something to do with national security. But this is an ordinary infrastructure, the biggest infrastructure in the history of this country. And the biggest thing people must understand, since Kenya got independence in 1963 to date, almost 90% of Kenyans don't believe the government.
Khelef, I want to ask you.
99% people think the government is corrupt. Now, please.
I want to ask you, so with what you're seeking now, is there any bit of information that you have regarding SGR? And how did you acquire this information?
Correct. There is nothing more we're asking.
Do you have any information so far? Have you come across any information at all with regards to SGR and the contracts?
No, nothing. Nothing. Despite...
How do you know these details that you're giving us about arbitration can only happen in China? Why did you get that information?
You see, there was pieces of information here and there through the media. Okay? But the real information, the real contract, the government said it's secret. They wrote to us. They said, no, we cannot divulge this information, period. So the pieces here and there, we just get it from the media.
Government does release information, but they are selective on what they share. So you'll get the amounts. And increasingly what Treasury now has put into the budget, into the debt strategy and into the annual debt report is they're giving the interest rates, they're giving the repayment period. They weren't giving those some 2-3 years back. But with increased pressure, they are giving more information. But still, we don't know the clauses. We don't know the penalties. We don't know if there is some hidden promises because the details are in the contracts. Now, I'll give you an example just to support what Khalid is saying. With the Eurobond, because the question, of course, came up, if you go on to the other country financial platforms, or even if you go onto the international Bloomberg platform, you will get information about the prospectuses, about the contracts and the terms of those contracts on their terminals. So that you wonder if countries, for instance, Argentina had challenges, Lebanon is also having some challenges with the Eurobond, but those contracts are available because they then run into trouble with the international creditors when they're not able to pay. The problem is when you're not able to pay, what are the strict restrictions on the country? That should be in the contract because we then know and Parliament also can oversight. There's another aspect there are two other aspects I think that come out. If we know those restrictions and those restrictions are unconstitutional under the law of Kenya, we will do what Mozambique did. We will go to court and say when these guys negotiated, they violated the law. So that contract actually can be nullified, right? And then, of course, the last thing is, if we have the contract, we can stop the gravy train that inflated SGR 4 times from the original cost that it was. Because that's the thing. SGR was inflated 4 times. Our SGR is 472 kilometers. Ethiopia's is 756 kilometers, kilometers. But then in cost, they are comparative. So theirs is twice as long, ours, and theirs is 3.4B. Ours is 3.2B. So
Arguments have been made. Ethiopia did not buy land. Ethiopia does not have the bridges and all those things. But I want to ask a different question. I get the issue of
Over-inflation.
accessing the contracts. Okay, and when I started by asking what information do you have presently, so that then we know this is the information that's available that the government has released so far, and this is the information that the government has not released so far specifically.
the contract.
And then you can also then tell us of the other bilateral agreements and projects that have been carried out in this country. Give us comparatively. Kenya, for example, signed a bilateral agreement for this specific project with this country, and that information is available, or that information is not available. So why focus on this particular bilateral agreement on this particular project? So those two questions. But let's start with the first one. How much information do you have so far?
There's information in the budget documents, and we've talked about the debt register here. Really, that's where the information should be.
Yeah.
But it isn't.
It isn't. There's information about this is the quantum, this is the creditor, this is the year it's due, interest rates. At least that is there now. The debt register hadn't been updated for some 4 years until there was some pressure. Actually, when we began talking to IMF, they then had to quickly update it, and it's 2 years. I think the latest date is 2018, right? So we have a debt register. We have an annual debt report. We've got the estimates. We've got the audit reports, because properly speaking, all indentures, these kind of restrictions, should be reported by the agency, the MDA, the agency that procures the loan, should, at the end of the financial year, report that. This information should be in the Auditor General's report. The contract, of course, can't be published with the Auditor General's report. It should be available online. So the Auditor General, the IMF in 2019 said this. This information is lacking. Actually, under our new IMF agreement, the details are supposed to now be published in the Auditor General report, because there is a gap. So one, we are not meeting the reporting standards we have set for ourselves.
And is this, I have to stop you there. Is this across board, or is this specifically with the SGR? Across board, with any kind
With
of
all
agreements that are
bilateral
done
and
by
multilateral
government.
agreements.
Government, bilateral, multilateral. Do we see that this is habitual? That there is not enough or any information concerning the agreements that are made?
Answer is
Or is
simple.
it this specific one with the SGR?
It's not specific to the SGR. It is across the commercial. And it might not be all the commercial, we'd have to check, but broadly it's against the commercial borrowing. And China, bilateral, for all intents and purposes, is behaving like commercial borrowing, because I've told you it's not bound by Paris, the Paris Accord. However, when it comes to the multilaterals, they themselves proactively disclose. So the government of Kenya may not post this information, but the World Bank will then put it out.
Will put it out there.
The World Bank will give intimate details, including the socio-economic. And in fact, if you've listened to government, they'll say, yeah, we went for the bilateral and commercial because these others take too long. Why? Because the World Bank will require you do step by step. And they then release money as you comply. Whereas with the bilaterals and the commercial, that money is made available based on your own documents. And we know government of Kenya loves to cook their documents.
The conversation continues. This is a Situation Room. In the room, you have Eric Latif, Nduoko, C.T. Muga, Wanjiru Gikonyo, our guest host today. And on the line is Khelef Khalifa. He's the director of Muslim for Human Rights, Muhuri. Muhuri, in coalition with the Okoa Mombasa lobby group and with collaboration with the Institute for Social Accountability, have gone to court, and they're asking the court to compel the government to release all the details surrounding the SGR. How much was borrowed? From whom? What are the details? What are the details of this contract? And basically, this is in the whole spirit of access to information, which there's a law in the country. So, Khelef, Have you tried going through the normal application of information from using the Access to Information Act? Who did you apply to? What response did you get?
That is the line that initially we took, because access to information is a constitutional provision, Articles 33 and 35, that it gives Wananchi to question the government. It was put in the constitution for a specific purpose. We wrote, as I said, to Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Transport. We wrote to Managing Director of Kenya Port Authority. We wrote to Director General National Bureau of Statistics. We wrote to Registrar General State Law Office, Solicitor General, and PS National Treasury. We were hoping at least the government will come up and tell us what transpired in that agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So the more they keep silent, the more they make us nervous. That there is something amiss, something these people are trying to hide. And we're not asking something that is beyond our rights. We know we don't. Okay. Now, you must remember, this idea of building SGR, it has drawn a lot of interest to Kenyans because it's the biggest infrastructure, $450 billion. It's a lot of money. And it was shrouded with a lot of lies. They're telling us we'll break even. This is the fourth year. It has not break even. Africa Star, which is contracted to run SGR, they have been paid in excess of 1 billion shillings per month. In fact, running this SGR, it cost taxpayers' money almost 18 billion. And what SGR brings in is much, much less. This money that should have access to buy the vaccine, COVID vaccine, medicine in the hospital, education, name it. They are going to the Chinese. And then the question I remember quoting David Ndii. He says, they're saying, once the containers arrived in Mombasa, within 4 hours it will be Nairobi. And the question is, you place your order in a foreign country to get those goods to Mombasa, it might take them 2 to 3 months. Why is it that it's so quick, so fast? You need, these containers are not perishable goods. They need to be at the destination very fast. It just doesn't make any sense. First, second, infrastructure of port was built privately, for almost how many years? And with, you name it, everything is here in Mombasa. Now, if Mombasa is congested, why taking all the way to Embakasi? Nairobi, it's already 4.5 million inhabitants. 80% of all industry in the country are stationed in Nairobi. You see, what is the point of this devolution? Devolution, it means economic, political. It means a lot of things. Okay, every county must be given opportunity to develop itself. Why everybody has to flock to Nairobi? Why can't it Bungoma and Lamu and Mombasa and Kwale and everybody, these areas develop itself? So Wananchi can also benefit, rather than every time you have to look to Nairobi, you have to go to Nairobi, you have to go to Nairobi. What is it? And another thing, which most important thing, Mombasa is dying because there was no public participation. Now it is not only Mombasa, all this corridor. Now you go to Voi, you go to Makindo, you go to all these areas that were depending on this transport are dead. Okay, had the government thought of building 3 superhighways, this side and that side, all the way to Malaba, it will have reduced deaths on road almost by 90%. It would have given an opportunity to all these small towns, could have come up economically better. Okay, all that was forgotten. And I remember the first month, Macharia, PS Transport, he came up bragging. He says, we have managed to keep off 8,000 trucks off the road. Not knowing 8,000 trucks. There are thousands of families depending on that. So they've taken that bread away from them. For the sake of government infrastructure, government is going to make money. Government is about people. You build this infrastructure and you make people poor. What is the point of that, really?
When I listen to you, Khelef, I hear a lot more than just the details of this particular contract. I hear you raising concerns about the viability of SGR from the very beginning. I hear you raising concerns about the effect that the SGR is having economically to Mombasa and the corridor. But I also hear you raising objections to railway as a mode of transport, which is a bit concerning for me. However, with all these things, my question is, suppose the information was released to you today, with all the concerns that you're raising about the socio-economic impacts of this one project to the region, if the information was released to you today as Muhuri, as Okoa Mombasa, then what?
Can I ask a question just on that? Because you've also asked for the environmental impact assessment report. Now, the questions you've just addressed would have been raised in the economic impact assessment. We have in Kenya a law governing the environmental impact assessment that requires public participation that is supposed to precede this kind of investment. So if that report exists and it's released, then I think it will be important to see where did government assess the number of jobs that will be lost, the mitigation factors that will be necessary, because environmental impact assessment will say, if we do this, this population will be affected. We must therefore take the following measures. So if we get that report, we will see what it said. Our suspicion is that that report does not exist. Or if it does, maybe it even says, do not proceed. Because I believe this is one of the documents that is being sought through this ATI. Khelef, have we seen an environmental impact assessment?
No, we haven't seen that one. And more importantly, when the government comes and says, all the containers must, that word, that all the containers must go on SGR, that is against the law. I'm the one, if I'm an importer, I will decide which mode of transport I want it to go. Then the government keeps lying and lying and lying. It is true, it is cheaper transport on SGR from Mombasa to Embakasi or to Suswa. It is true. But there are underlying costs. You load a container here in a truck, then goes from port to its final destination. Okay? But when you load in an SGR, they will dump it either in Naivasha or in Embakasi. Then the transporter has to find another transport that is another additional cost. Second, those containers must also go back to Mombasa. Okay, that is also another cost. Now, when you calculate all these costs, it is much, much expensive.
Khelef, let me ask you a question, if I may. Given the number on the subject of containers, is the SGR in a position to actually transport the volume of containers that come to the port of Mombasa on a daily, monthly, yearly basis? Are they able to actually transport them all?
No, they are not.
All right. If let's say we had 3 railway lines doing the same thing, would we be able to transport the containers?
Look, Kenya is not an industrialized country. Take any industrial country in the world, Japan, America, Europe, they have vast railway
Networks.
infrastructure, networks, but they don't bar trucks from operating, and trucks they're operating into thousands or millions. But this government was trying to completely kill. And another thing, Mombasa has no economy other than port. We have no agriculture. We have nothing. We depend on this port. And if Mombasa dies because of port, the Coast Province also will be affected. Okay. So taking the economy from one region to the other, we said that is not fair. More so, had there been public participation, probably the government would have known that people are against. And we're not against SGR, by the way. We're not. But we want commercially decisions to be taken, not force people. It will come a time we wonder why government is not telling Kenyans, don't fly with any other airlines. You fly Kenya Airways because this is national interest. Why they don't do that? So this is our problem.
Khelef, there's Okoa Mombasa. I've been thinking about this. Why the name Okoa Mombasa? Why? What does Mombasa need to be Okoa'd from?
It needs Mombasa to be Okoa'd. Look,
Mimi naitwa Muga.
there is a problem. Muga, brother Muga.
Yes.
Let me tell you this. We were the most affected economically. Okay? Because when the port was operating, you have all this personnel from warehousing. You know how ports operate.
I do.
All these people moved from Mombasa to the other side. Okay? Now the employment, you go to housing today in Mombasa, you see so many shops. The price now has come down almost 40%. If you want to buy property today in Mombasa, it was not as it was 4 or 5 years ago. Everything has dropped. Okay, this is our worry. You should not raise economy of the government by squeezing other part of the country down.
Right.
And what we want is just truth. Tell us the truth, because we are sure these guys. You see the Chinese, at least other lenders, as Wanjiru has said, they're all looking for the interest. Even IMF, World Bank, they all look on the interest. Okay, but at least they have got their laws. Sometimes they're back with human rights violations, but Chinese don't give a damn. Even if we kill each other today, government kills 100 people or 10,000 people, Chinese will still doing business with Kenya government without even giving a question, and that is our. And why should we impose by Chinese laws? Okay, how?
I want to go back to my question. We'll come back to this one of arbitration. I want to go back to my question. So first of all, I think it would be an assumption, and I think I have a belief that it would be a fallacious assumption to assume that this project commenced without an environmental and social impact assessment.
Our records show that it did.
That
Our
there was no
records show that
ESIA.
It's not in the public domain.
That doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
The World Bank's assessment showed that, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. So let them produce it. And if it was done, it didn't follow procedure because there's no evidence of the public participation meetings on the ground.
Okay.
In other words, this project was taken from the Vision 2030, put into the MTP2, and in the process it changed because Vision 2030 proposed to rehabilitate the existing railway line, which was going to be a fraction of the cost, and which the World Bank then argued this is sustainable because we don't have the volume of traffic to build a new railway line. And they gave examples of countries like Brazil that are using a rehabilitated line. So number one, the cost and the viability and the returns, let alone the project that was then put into the MTP2 that then sought to even build this inland container depot, that then sought to build a new railway line.
Okay, hold on. Let's just stick with the question first,
The
so that we can respond to it. About
Environmental
social impact assessment.
Evidence is, in fact, that they signed the contract before cabinet approved.
Had approved an ESIA.
No, had approved
The project.
The project.
So ESIA, hakukuwa na time. ESIA has, listen,
So
you have
my
to
question,
understand
can I ask
that
the question
the law provides restrictions. ESIA process is an oversight mechanism inbuilt. So ESIA does not work well with budgeted corruption. This is what we are trying to say in so
Eric,
many
you want to
words.
ask your question?
Yes.
Ask your question.
So, now since you seem to be aware to have the information that there is no ESIA, and you seem to have the information about the origin of the project, you seem to have a lot of information about the project. Suppose the court grants the order today, and you get all the information that you seek today, then what is the plan going forward? What do you want to do with this information in hand, Khelef?
I think many people will go to jail. I have no doubt about it. And the biggest reason why these people are keeping this information in their chest, even after the president himself ordered that we release that agreement, but he couldn't. Kwa sababu kuna madhambi mengi sana kwa hii. People will go to jail. I'm telling you. That's why they don't release.
So are you saying that once you get this information, then you go through it, then you start criminal proceedings? Is that the agenda? What is the agenda? That's what I'm asking.
I'm telling you, read my lips. If somebody do economic sabotage against Kenyans, that person belongs to jail. And we'll go after each and every one of them.
That is, it's a plain and obvious truth. You still haven't answered my question. The plan, once you have been at this since 2018, you have written to all these agencies in government asking for information. You have not received any response from these agencies of government. You have now gone to court, seeking the court to compel these agencies of government to release the information that what have you been wanting to do with the information? That is the basic question I'm asking.
Or when the information is gotten, will it then be taken to the same agencies who've been reluctant to give you the information in the first place and then ask them to begin proceedings of prosecution?
Yeah, what's the game plan?
What is it?
The accountability process proceeds on this. Number one, there is a law. So the line we are taking is the law. If this law was breached, we must then take the due measures. The accountability process is not based on, we know the court will give us this ruling. Our role is to get the evidence. Our role is to follow the due process and to expect that the mechanisms that exist will do what they need to do. But beyond that, there is something called social sanction. If once that information is available and people know that there were violations, that really economic sabotage was committed, the people of Kenya then will begin to exercise their options. When you're in a state of capture, and I've shared this before, because we're in a state of capture, the judiciary is under duress, parliament is in the pocket of the executive, you don't sit and wait for the regime to topple itself. It will never do so. You must act, get the evidence, pursue the mechanisms, mobilize the public, and let's see what happens. We do our best, and the citizens will surprise you. They'll be the ones to come up in arms. And I have spoken for Khalid. I'm sure he has.
Okay, so if I attempt to answer my question,
better views.
If I attempt to answer my question, so you want the information, and then you want now that information to be made public. Do you, for example, as TISA, do you want then, after the information is public, to go ahead and create public awareness forums so that people can start interrogating this information? Because information can be made public and it's available to TISA and it's available to Muhuri and Okoa Mombasa. But if you don't have a plan of what you want to do with that information, that's what I'm asking.
But Khalifa has told you, take it to court. You prosecute these people.
Take who to court?
You prosecute. You see, you can't prosecute those who have committed
Without
economic
evidence.
without evidence. So we are looking for evidence. What part is not clear, Khalif? We are looking for evidence.
Okay.
And also, there's a lesson there so that future leaders do not manipulate the law to undermine an entire region of the country, contrary to the principles and aspirations of the Constitution.
All right. Khalif, as we conclude the conversation, you are where you are right now. You are in court. As you speak to your fellow members and those that support the Okoa Mombasa movement, what would you like to tell them this morning?
We are behind everybody's interest, but we are trying to tell the government that we are not going to relent. We want to get the truth, and the truth will open up the doors for our next action. If somebody has wronged us economically, there is a price to pay. We are not going to relent. Even though we know how government disobey court orders, we shall be very consistent. We will never stop. No matter what they do, we'll never stop. This country, from where it started, where we have reached, it is because there are people who stood up and said no. Okay? And we still say no. And we'll fight for the rights of the people. The Constitution is ours. Okay? And we'll exercise our right in that Constitution. Eventually, the truth will come up. If we don't get justice today, this people will never stay in power forever. But accountability is the most important thing. Otherwise, this country will be a banana republic. We have two sets of laws. There are those top there with impunity. They can break the law and nothing happens to them. But we tell them, time will come. Believe me, time will come.
That's very well said. Thank you very much, Khalifa, and we always support such kind of citizen action. Asante sana. Khalifa is the director of Muslim for Human Rights. All the best with this particular petition and all other accountability measures that you're taking. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much.